Hi, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, everyone. Thanks a lot for taking the time and joining us today for this first session on leadership, which I'm kind of trying to drive as we go along. Hi, good afternoon. Just give me a second. Thanks a lot for joining in. Let me just share my screen and let's get started. So if you're joining live on LinkedIn and would like to join on the Zoom so that we can actually have a conversation as we go along, please feel free to do so as well. I've put the Zoom link on the chat, so please do join us on the Zoom directly as well, so that we can not only watch, but you can also have a conversation with each other. So first and foremost, why are we here and what are we going to do here? So the world around us is changing faster and faster. I don't have to go and explain this particular thing. I'm pretty sure that every one of us has experienced at some level how this entire world is changing. So maybe on the chat, if you can actually share what according to you is changing and changing really fast, and then we can kind of go from there. I can tell you this from my experience. The world is changing in terms of the political order is changing with all the socio-political situation, let's say in Ukraine, in India, in China, in the US. The socio-political order in the entire world is changing really, really fast. The demographics is changing in terms of there are certain set of geographies which are emerging with a young populace. There is a different part of the world which is entering into or getting a different kind of demographic people, which creates its own set of challenges and opportunities as well, right? And nothing can beat the change that technology is ushering in the entire world. So we now know that ChatGPT probably became the fastest technology product to have crossed 100 million active users in the shortest amount of time. And the artificial intelligence that is powering ChatGPT and similar tools, whether it is Bard, whether it is any other tool, whether it is image creation, whether it is video creation, the world is no longer the same. The barrier to create content, the barrier to create something new has gone down significantly. And at the same time, the barrier to making money out of any of these things has gone up significantly. The barrier to find success as a content creator has gone up significantly. The difficulty with which you can lead an organization has gone up significantly. The difficulty with which you kind of retain talent within your organization has multiplied multifold. We have already seen what people call the great resignation some time back. We have seen what people have called the great layoff in a way recently. We've seen the stock market crash recently. We've seen a rally of the stock market recently. What I'm trying to get at is the world around us is changing faster and faster and faster. And as leaders, we need to figure out a way to change as well. Not only do we need to change as leaders, how we lead needs to change as well in this changing environment. Gone are the days when you could actually rely on standard leadership principles. Gone are those days when you can actually rely on standard management practices. You kind of have a vision, you set KPIs, you create a cascading set of objectives, and then we kind of roll. No longer works, because by the time we define the strategy, by the time that strategy is rolled out into the organization to the levels where the strategy needs to be executed, the world has already changed. So which means that the strategy that we have created for the world that we anticipated in has changed, needs to change as well. That is from an organization perspective, right? So as an organization, if you're leading an organization, the strategy with which that you define needs to keep pace with the context in which the strategy needs to be implemented. What happens with people, right? So if you're a middle manager, if you're leading a small team in a large organization, what does that mean for you to see that the entire world is changing? To know that the strategy that the leaders at the top of the organization are kind of creating, by the time it gets trickled down to you and your team, it needs updation as well. How do you lead in such a world, in your team in such a world? The amount of change within the organization is also humongous, because the leader is also trying to keep up with the change. The number of reorgs that you see in large organizations has gone up significantly and is happening more faster and faster and faster. So how do you keep up with this? So what you do as a leader needs to change. How we lead needs to change. And we as leaders need to change as well. So if you look at it, there are three perspectives here. So one is, what do I need to do differently as a leader, which is personal, self. Second is, how do I lead my team, which is leading your small or the large team that you're leading. And last but not the least, how do you lead the organization, which is external focus. Now, what I'm trying to do here is build a tribe of leaders who are willing and want to continuously learn and adapt in this world, which is changing so fast. So the idea here is the following. We will come together on a regular basis. We will talk about multiple aspects of leadership and how it needs to evolve as the world around us evolves as well. We need to look at multiple facets of leadership, and that's what we want to do as part of these Leaders Unite series. The idea here is to build a community of leaders who will come together maybe every week, Friday, same time, and talk about what are some of the challenges that they're facing, how are they addressing it, and as a team, is there a way that we can actually help each other out by making sense of what's happening in the world, and at the same time learn from each other such that we can go back into our worlds a better leader than we were when we walked in to the Leaders Unite calls. I know that like any other movement, this is going to start small. So if you are willing to do so, please put it on the chat and or message me or email me, and we can start building the community one leader at a time. Until that time, I will continue to host these calls on LinkedIn until we start maybe having 8-10 leaders join us on a regular basis. Then we kind of move it into a private community, and of course we can publish the content or the learning of the entire session into a compact form and still share it with the larger world, so that everyone else can benefit from the wisdom that is being shared as part of this community. Now, every time we come together, I strongly believe that we need to add value to people who are spending time with us. So today, what I'm going to do is talk to you about a leadership framework that I've thought through that I think potentially can help us lead in uncertain and chaotic times. So the components, what are the components of this leadership framework? Let's go through each one of them, right? So one of the thinks that uncertainty and chaotic times means that there is uncertainty ahead. And we need to come at this uncertainty with a mindset of celebrating the uncertainty and playing with it. Now, typically what happens is when you enter into an uncertain, chaotic world, the first reaction that we have as humans is to shut down, is to hunker down, is to kind of, think or close our eyes and hope that things go back to normal. Or we are afraid of the uncertainty because that's the biological way we have evolved. Now, in order for us to deal and lead in a way which is useful for both us and helpful to our team and organizations, is to approach uncertainty with the mindset of celebrating it, because in each one of these uncertain periods lies the opportunity of a lifetime. You can find that some of the largest organizations and some of the most celebrated leaders around the world made their mark in uncertain times, whether it is Mahatma Gandhi, whether it is Martin Luther King, whether it is Steve Jobs, whether it is anyone else. Any leader worth his mettle would have made a name for themselves in how they found opportunity within the uncertain periods that they led their organizations and led their teams in. So that is the most important thing, which is to have the right mindset, which is to come at it with a mindset of how do we celebrate this uncertainty? How do we find out the opportunity that lies within this period of challenges that we are going to face in uncertain and chaotic times? And play. What do I mean by play? So typically, when you're playing, you're having fun, right? So you're kind of coming at it from the perspective of, okay, what happens if I do this? What happens if I do this? What happens if I do this? The curiosity that play brings with it, and the ability that if we approach something with a playful mindset, is that we are light with it. We are not stuck with perfection. We are in that mode of experimentation and learning through the experimentation, and which is super important, because when it comes to uncertainty, one of the things that we need to keep in mind is that because of the human biological conditioning, we need to have something stable on which to stand on, and then probe what is happening around us, to understand what is happening around us, to make sense of what is happening around us in order for us to decide and move forward. So first and foremost, we need to have the mindset, the right mindset, which is to come to the party with a mindset of celebrating and playing with the uncertainty. So the next one is to have the right tool sets. So what do I mean by tool sets? I think many tool sets that come to mind when it comes to uncertain times. One is, how do you make judgment calls, right? So you will not have the perfect data. You will not know everything that you would want to know in order to make good decisions. But you still need to make decisions, because one of the worst things that you can do in uncertain times and chaotic times is to not do anything. Of course, if it is a very calculated and deliberate decision to do nothing, that's a different thing. But inaction and getting stuck in the way you are doing because you're stuck, and if it is not a deliberate choice, then that's the worst thing that you can do in a chaotic and uncertain environment, because not only are you missing the opportunity, that the seed of opportunity that lies within these times, you're also making sure that you're falling behind a lot more than you would otherwise. So you need to learn how to make decisions with incomplete data, you need to decide, you need to be able to make judgment calls, right? So how do you make judgment calls based on your past experiences and intuition? You need to be able to start and run multiple experiments. So how do you do that in order to make sense? So you probe the environment, you probe the system to figure out what's happening, what's changed in the context within which you are operating, and therefore make sense of the change, and therefore be able to respond to the change, right? So you need to be able to make judgment calls. You need to be able to make decisions with incomplete data. So you need to be able to allow people to make judgment calls as well. So the ability to delegate power on how to respond in certain given context to the last mile of your organization, the tip of the organization, which actually interacts with the external systems and the external parties. So do you have the ability, and how do you create those tools and systems which enable your last mile of the organization to interact with the outside world and to be able to make decisions on the go as they go along? So the power to delegate authority of decision making. So it is more about moving from a control kind of a framework to a framework where the decision making is not controlled, but it is distributed across the organization at the front line, right? So you need to have the right mindset. You need to have the right tool set. So once you have both, you also need awareness. You need awareness both about yourself in terms of, how are you responding to the change? Is it creating fear inside of you? Is it creating the mindset of playfulness? Are you coming at it from feeling threatened? Are you coming at it from, are you aware of what is it that you want to achieve in this particular state of the organization or as a leader? Are you aware of the social structure around you? Are you aware how your team members are feeling? Are they feeling threatened? Are they feeling enthused? Are they feeling or are they seeing the opportunities that exist in the current situation? Or are they finding it tough to manage, to keep up? Is there change fatigue within them? What is it that they are trying to achieve individually? What is the interaction that is happening between them? So what is the politics that is being played out within the organization? And yes, it is important to understand what each one of the people that you're leading is feeling and wanting to achieve given the current circumstances. And what mindset do they bring, and what skill sets do they bring to the conversation? So this level of awareness as to what is it that you want to achieve from the situation, what is it that your people around you want to achieve from this situation, and what does the organization wants to achieve in the current situation? What are the challenges that you are facing? What are the challenges that your team is facing individually and collectively? And what are the challenges that the organization is facing at an organizational level? So unless you are aware of all of these things, there's nothing much that you can do, right? And everything that you do will only create more chaos and more uncertainty. So what next? What else is needed? So once you understand what you want, once you understand what your teams want, once you understand what your organization wants, you have the right mindset that you bring to the situation, you have the right tools that you bring to the situation. All you need to do then is do sense making. You need to make sense of everything that is happening, make the decision, and then do one of two things, right? So you make sense, and then you either act on whatever you've made sense from, or you actually communicate what you've, the sense that you've made from all of this coming together, right? One of the things that we need to understand is that the world that we are living in is a complex adaptive system. What do I mean by complex adaptive system? Number one, it is a system, right? Everything is connected to everything else, now more so than ever before. And that is probably also why the pace of change is just phenomenal and is increasing at an ever more rapid pace. So everything is connected to everything else. It's a system. It's complex because you do not know what is actually causing what. So you do not know whether a war in Ukraine is causing shortage of toilet paper in Singapore or in the US. Or a COVID pandemic in China can actually shut down the travel industry for the entire world. So, number one, we are living in a system. It's complex and it's adaptive. What do I mean by adaptive? You make something or you try to change something in the system, it adapts to that change, which means that the change or the intervention that you're having in the system at one point in time will actually create a consequence that in the system, which means it could be both intended consequence, which is what you are trying to achieve, and at the same time will also have unintended consequences, which means that any change or intervention that you are trying to do within the system will have intended and unintended consequences, which means you need to go looking for the unintended consequence. It could be good or bad, doesn't matter. But definitely, apart from the intended consequence, there will also be unintended consequence. Right? Now, how do we make sense of all of this and then continue to interact with the system is what leadership is going to become as we go along. What that means is leadership or the act of leading is going to be like a dance that you do with the system. The system could be your team, the system could be your organization, the system could be your family, the system could be anything else, an IT system or a technology system, anything. But the way the entire thing is going to play out is that you're dancing with the system, which means that you need to react to your partner's move and the partner reacts to your move. And unless you are able to make that sense and kind of continuously sense, probe, sense, adapt, and continue this dance, you will fall behind. And that is why it is important that as leaders, we come together and continue to learn, continue to make sense of the world that we are operating in, continue to learn how to dance with the systems, continue to probe how the systems are kind of working. So based on all of this, this is the leadership model that I've come up with. If you look at it, it's the shape of a butterfly, so which in a way, what I'm trying to say is you are transforming into a beautiful leader, just like a butterfly is formed. And if you actually look at it, there are 7 components of this leadership model that I have put together. So the first one is to have the right mindset. So I can talk about multiple different mindsets that we can bring to a particular situation. We will talk about it in detail as we go along in the subsequent weeks. We bring in the right tool sets. And with the tool sets, I also include the skill sets that is required, which means that, not only do we bring tools that will help us, number one, delegate, that will help us experiment, that will help us probe the system, that will help us understand what's happening. But at the same time, we'll also bring skill sets like, for example, decision-making under uncertainty, making judgment calls. How do you decide when to trust your intuition and when not to trust it, and many more such tool sets. It also is important to have self-awareness, which is what is it that we want to achieve in a given situation, and what are some of the challenges or biases that we bring to the situation, and what are some of the strengths that we bring to the situation. And at the same time, also have social awareness, which is what does people around us bring to the table, both from a challenges perspective as well as from an opportunity perspective and skills perspective. And what is it that they want to achieve? What do we want to achieve? What do they want to achieve individually and as a collective? And what do we want to achieve together as an organization as well? So that's the self-awareness and the social awareness piece. So once you bring all of these things together and do a little bit of sense making and decide what needs to happen, you can either take an action, which is, go do something, or you can communicate what everyone else needs to do, right? So you can communicate to inform people of what needs to be done. You can communicate to inspire people about what is it that they need to do or where the potential lies. And at the same time, you can also communicate to inspire them. So you can communicate to inform, to inspire, and yeah. So, and at the same time, actions, you can do multiple actions. You can either go do something with someone. You can go talk to someone. You can go actually build something. And yeah, so many different ways of acting as a leader. So all of this, when comes together in a beautiful way, is when I believe high performance leadership will happen in a chaotic and uncertain environment. And what we will do in subsequent weeks, every Friday, 4 p.m. Singapore time, 1:30 India time, and whatever time that means for all of you, is we'll come together every Friday. We'll take one aspect of each one of these aspects, go deeper, and find out what does that mean, and learn from each other, talk to each other in terms of what are some of the challenges that you face, what are some of the ideas that you have. And this is kind of a mastermind, if I may call it so, and learn from and with each other. So I'll just stop there. That's what I had prepared for today, to see if there are any questions or any thoughts or comments that come up in the chat here on Zoom or on LinkedIn, as we are live on LinkedIn as well. So if you're live on LinkedIn and if you have any questions, thoughts, comments, please do share it on the chat, and I will try and respond to that as well. I know that it is important as leaders in these environments to be able to make to create a trusted environment, to create a safe environment for your people, to take care of your people. Mental health becomes super important as we live in a world which is constantly changing, and we need to change along with it. When the pace of change is outpacing our ability to keep pace with it, it creates a lot of challenges for us as individuals to kind of take care of. So we will talk about trust, how to build trust in an environment that is fast changing. We will talk about mindsets. We will talk about empathy. We will talk about leadership skills. We will talk about tools that you can use as leaders to not only build trust, but also build engagement and connection with your team. We'll also talk about how can you create a culture in which your team members can thrive. We will talk about a culture where not only do you come together as a team that becomes stronger together, but we will also talk about how do you build a culture where each one of you can actually multiply the impact that you have together as a team. We will talk about probing the system. We will talk about sense making. We will talk about how do you take care of yourself as a leader in this world. How do you take care of your team members in this fast changing world? We will talk about how do you build meaning, how do you create visions, how do you create how do you act with your team members? When do you act as a midwife versus when do you act as a mechanic versus when do you act like a coach? When do you act like a mentor? When do you act like a friend? When do you act like a parent? When do you act like a mentor? How do you communicate to inform? How do you communicate your vision? How do you build a vision from in the first phase? How do you lead change, transformative change? We will talk about different kinds of stakeholders, of how do you manage the different stakeholders. We will talk about positive deviances. We will talk about bringing elements of play. We will talk about bringing elements of authenticity. We will talk about how do you create communities of action. We will talk about how do you create a culture where you're inclusive. You are not only are you able to bring in ideas from everyone else around you, but also at the same time bring in the ability to stay fair to everyone, to build equity. We will also talk about how do you create models of reference of the world that you see or operate in, and therefore not only test the model, but also move from struggling to keep pace to sustaining change, to flourishing in change, to thriving in fast-paced, ever-changing world. We'll talk about challenges that you face as leaders, some of the questions that you need to answer. We will talk about frameworks of leadership, which are not only the one that I spoke about just now, but also multiple other frameworks that we can learn from. We will talk about resources which you can actually use in order to kind of continue to learn and continue to work with. We will talk about foresight, strategic foresight that every leader needs to learn how to build. We will talk about world building. We'll talk about imagination and the power of pragmatic imagination. We will talk about creating networks, informal networks, and the power of informal networks. How do you go about creating these informal networks, the kind of impact these informal networks have when it comes to making sense of the world or the context in which you're operating. We will talk about managing energy, not only your own, but also the energy of your team. We will talk about creating experiences for your team, for your customers. We will talk about how every interaction we have with people is nothing but a transfer of energy. We will talk about how you as a leader is like the sun of a solar system around which planets orbit, which is your team orbiting around you. So, which means that you need to play the role of a sun in a solar system for your team, which means that you need to give them a lot more and hold them together by your gravitational force, if I may say so. We will talk about how do you create interesting observations through storytelling. We will explore how storytelling, strategic storytelling, works for you as a leader in to keep your team together. We will talk about how you need to take care of your own energy and replenish yourself and do self-care. We'll talk about how you can help your team to replenish their energy on an ongoing basis and come together and work together and stay together. We'll talk about systems thinking. We'll talk about learnings from systems thinking in terms of, how do you take things apart to understand and integrate them together to make sense. We will talk about frameworks like Canadian frameworks, which actually helps you understand what kind of a system are you working with. Is it a complex system? Is it a complicated system? Is it a chaotic system? Is it a structured system? And what kind of actions can you take depending upon the kind of system that you are dealing with? When does best practices are useful? When are next practices useful? When are experiments useful? We will talk about how do you assess a given situation that you are operating in? How do you adapt to the situation? How do you pivot and then finally accept? So we will talk about acceptation as a process, which is very, very interesting, which is how nature functions, which is continuously evolve, then accept, which is discontinuous adaptation. Then again, continuously adapt, and then discontinuous adaptation by acceptation. And then, of course, we will figure out how to transcend these changes and build the capacity within your organization to get better and better and to thrive in an environment which is chaotic and uncertain, which ultimately means that your organization becomes anti-fragile, which means that as a leader, you become anti-fragile. So that's all I have for today. And I can see there are a few people on the LinkedIn watching this live. So if you have any questions, please do post them on the chat, and I will try and answer them. If not, I'll just wait for another couple of minutes on the call and then disconnect if I don't see any further questions. Okay, looks like there are no questions coming up right now. So thank you. If you're watching this live, thank you for your time. If you're watching a recording of this session, please do reach out to me on my LinkedIn, on my YouTube, comment wherever you're watching the recording, and we will continue the conversation on that particular platform. Thank you so much. Take care of yourself, take care of your teams that you're leading, the people that you're leading, and until next week, next Friday, this is Mukesh signing off. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.